I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and I'm so thrilled today to be talking about the Netflix series God's Favorite Idiot. We are joined by creator, writer, executive producer, and actor Ben Falcone, actor and executive producer Melissa McCarthy, as well as cast members Usman Ali and Yanic Truesdale. And Ben, I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the way in which you've created this series, because when you step back, if you took out the elements of God and Satan and that entire storyline, it would still be this really intimate, connected character and exploration of comedy with this like lovely shy man who loves his dad, makes great chicken, and whose coworkers and friends really help him come out of his shell. And so I was interested in the way that you created and wrote a lot of the characters in that way, where yes, we have this kind of larger than life element, but at the end of the day, it's also this really grounded, intimate, connected comedy.
Well, I'm fascinated by logistics. I think about if you think of like the worst things that people have had to do in this world, like if they're in a war or something, well, at some point they have to go to the bathroom. When do you go to the bathroom? How do you go to the bathroom when you know what I mean? And when do you eat? And, like, how do you, so I thought in this sort of larger than life scenario where you take this, I do always write from characters first, but when you take this very real man who lives in Burbank, California, and he's chosen for reasons he does not know, and then you put him. It was a book at first, a long time ago, and then Melissa about 3 years ago said, "Oh, we should make this into a TV show, and they should all work in an IT office. That's what the guy is." And I was like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." So
I love to just say things that have no knowledge.
So yeah, I mean, I think I just sort of take the story step by step. And, there was the idea that he's in this office, he's got his friends, he's supported by, Usman is in the office and his boss is Frisbee. And, he's got Tom, who's the loudmouth, and Amelie, who's the crazy woman that he loves. And, Wendy, who's just the sweetest, maybe his closest friend there, so it just sort of like grew step by step. And, I didn't exactly always know where it was going, and it was kind of a pleasure to find it as we went.
Yeah, I really love that. And Melissa, with your character, Amelie, what's so fun in watching her is she's this woman who everything she says and all of her actions, she kind of just throws herself wholeheartedly into things and doesn't necessarily stop to have the thought process before she does anything. If there's any sort of like recognizance, it happens after the fact. And what are the comedic spaces that you felt like you were really able to take this character with the fact that every single action, every single thing that she's saying has to have such kind of fully committed delivery to it in an instant?
I think I'm a people person. I love to watch people. I love meeting people. And I just thought when I first read Amelie, I was like, I would really like to be friends with her, because you don't know what's coming next. She's not perfect, nor are any of my friends or people I love. I don't know any perfect people. And I really am attracted to characters that just simply are forward momentum. They're like, I'm moving. We have to get through. We have to progress. I don't know what's on the other side of the door, but somebody has to go through it. And it's going to be me. Like, I love that in a person. And then somehow how Ben writes, you have all that chaos and spontaneity and madness. And then, Amelie has drugs and booze and whatever else she's doing. But somehow at the heart of how she's written, that it's still, she will be there for you, that she still is motivated from love, even if it's aggressive. She aggressively loves, she aggressively defends, and yet there's still a core of kindness, which to me, just as a human, is a great reminder to not judge people. Don't judge a book by its cover. It's like, she's loud, she's brash, but I would feel lucky to have Amelie as a friend, and like, you may not think that upon first meeting her. So I love to show characters that have all their flaws, but to me, it makes them beautiful.
Absolutely. And Usman, in talking about your character as well, I was interested in how you kind of created him and developed this arc that he goes on throughout the series, because, even for him, the thing of like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube says so much about his upbringing, his past, the way his parents raised him, the perfectionism that he's striving for. And so kind of letting go of completing a Rubik's puzzle is like a huge change for him. And you have this kind of natural evolution in him, but then you also kind of have to find where it's heightened because of the situation and because of the fact that he knows that his life could end any moment with everything going on. And so how did that kind of move the momentum forward a lot more in some of the changes that you wanted to make throughout the series?
Well, I think what was really great was that, Ben allowed me to find the sort of immigrant experience that Mohsin has without also saying, hey, we want to talk about the immigrant experience. You know what I mean? Like it was, myself, I came to this country 20 years ago, and I'm Muslim, and I very rarely see characters that are like me on TV shows. That sort of representation is really missing. And it was important for us to find a character that could be that person without it being like, here's our statement on race and diversity and multiculturalism and all those sorts of things. So the relationship that Mohsin starts to have with Wendy, for example, it's really great because it allowed us to find a very American story of two people who've come from different parts of the world, who've come together, particularly at this point where there's something potentially terrible about to happen, and leaning in on each other. So it's very American in some ways, but also this very global story, right? Because they come from different parts of the world. So it was very meaningful to me to be able to create this person who is the embodiment of what I think is America right now, who has a sense of humor, but is also kind of beholden to the sense of responsibility that he needs to do things sort of the hard way because he needs to prove that he's valid. And I think that's a huge part of the immigrant story and struggle in this country is finding ways in which you can feel and prove to people that you belong. And sometimes it's important to also be able to let that go. And I think Wendy is somebody who comes in and allows him to sort of let that go a little bit too. So it was just really nice to be able to find that sort of structure in the character and to build on his real wants and desires and how he feels being here. So,
I really love those details. And Yanic, in talking about your character, I was really interested in how you kind of developed and shaped this character, because on the one hand, you're playing this very ethereal character as an angel, but it also at the same time, it has to be a very grounded character that kind of connects in the same way for the audience to kind of connect to him and care about him, but also through the care that he then in turn has for the other characters. And so what were the unique aspects of developing a character in that way, where you have those elements, but ultimately at the end of the day, it's still kind of the same structure and process of shaping someone?
Yeah, so I worked in a way that I try to make specific what it meant for him to be on Earth when he would come to Earth. So for me, the Earth was like as if Samuel got to go to Disneyland. And so everything was fun and new and felt like a ride and exciting for him. But in order to keep him grounded and make him as real as the other humans, I just decided that the fact that he was an angel was more like someone who had become to a state of mind like Buddhism, where you've done a lot of work and your anger and your stress is there, but you know how to manage it. And it's just there with all the other stuff, and it's all good. It doesn't matter how you feel. It's good because you got to make the best out of it. And so I created that reality for me when I was interacting with other people. So I was a human, but just a human a little bit ahead of them emotionally. So that way I could interact with them as a human. And also the Earth and everything that I had to deal while I was on that mission was an amusement park for him. So that's how I created those two realities and make it connected to them and to the show so that you're in the same show. You're not in,
Yeah, absolutely. That's so great. And Ben, kind of coming back to you and your character with Clark, it is really lovely to watch him go through this journey of really finding his voice a lot more throughout the series. There's that great flashback scene at the beginning where he couldn't even sit alone with Amelie, even though he was obsessively in love with her. And he's just like, have a great night, and walks away, to the point where he's the first person in their relationship to say, I love you to her. And so how did you kind of work it out in the writing of him and the performance of him in calibrating where those kind of like small nuanced evolutions of him finding his voice were going to be, so that you could take him to that point towards the end of the series?
Well, I'm very boring. I'm a very pragmatic, boring.
It's not true.
Person in that way, like that. I just see he starts at the start and he gets to where he gets to, right? So I'm very, obviously we never have the luxury to film in order, which I'm sure all of us actors would tell you one of, if we could do that, boy, would we make different choices here and there. But I just always, I really have taken a lot from all the great actors that we know, and not just the amount of preparation that they do. Allison Janney has a giant like chalkboard or whiteboard or something that she writes every moment of every movie on this thing. So before she goes to hair and makeup, she knows where she is in the movie. So I tried to do something sort of similar to that. I watched Melissa do very similar things. Yanic, I know, is, obsessive with his script, and I'm sure Usman has his process as well. So I just basically try to steal from people who do a consistently great job. And, that's how I was like, okay, well, here's where he is today, and just, do my best.
That's so interesting to hear. And Melissa, you were talking before about with Amelie, obviously she loves people around her so fiercely, but she has such a unique way of expressing that. She has her own very specific love language. For her, she can't say I love you back straight away, but she'll make herself a key, move all her things in, and say it practically and logically made sense that we move in together for the next step in our relationship. And so how did you kind of find what her love language was going to be, particularly in getting to watch the beginning of this relationship coming together?
I kind of map out I almost do it like a flow chart. I map out all my scenes, and I want to watch the ebb and flow, and where it's hot and where it's cold and why. And then there was something struck me in looking at it, is when I cared the most and was doing sometimes the most selfless things, she did it in a way that would never show that. It's almost like if I wanted to be kind to something, I'd do it on the side and it's over with. Because I don't think Amelie could quite, I don't think she had the trust to expect people to take it kindly. And so I thought she does it anyway, tries to not make a fuss of it. But in the end, it was like, I thought her actions were always kind of doing the right thing, even if her mouth wasn't, which is something I can really kind of relate to. I often say the wrong things, but I hopefully mean well. But, it was really there in the writing. And Ben is so open to, if I'm hesitant somewhere, I want to play this hotter or more insecure because I want to be able to go up to come back down. Like, I think it's always it's a give and take. I think you have to keep letting your characters fall down, or else the audience has nothing to root for. If you're already up, you want to see them. You want to see people fall down. Hopefully, do it in a realistic, in this case, funny way, and then that allows your audience to kind of get invested and be like, get up, you can do it. And I think when you do that, and all these characters in GFI, to me, are really doing that. I mean, they're all going through their own thing, which is also a really nice tether that, like, aren't we all going through it? Don't we all have our weaknesses and our proud moments and our failures? And if you start to realize everybody has all those, you're less likely to, be jealous of someone or to be insecure. What a great place if we could all get to a spot where we're like, yeah, we all go through it. Like, just, we could relax. And I think that character allowed me to really play with that.
That's so great.
Does that make any sense? I hope.
It makes so much sense. These are all such great details,
Oh no.
Similar to how Ben and Melissa were describing, kind of like charting those arcs for you, Usman, because you're getting to play that, that relationship development with Wendy as well. Did you have kind of a similar method of how you would kind of chart out what that was going to be to make sure that it was calibrated throughout the series, or how did you approach that evolution for him? Yeah,
it was really interesting, even in terms of just something very basic like costume and what he was wearing. When I was speaking to the costume designer on the show, I was like, it'd be really fantastic if he starts to loosen up a little bit as he sort of his relationship with Wendy progresses, because she is kind of far more outlandish. So you see a little bit more color coming into his life. He's making these little steps that, hoping that she'll notice, that, look, I'm wearing something a little bit more relaxed today, not so monochromatic as I was before. Little things here and there that these sort of little gifts that they give each other, So it was important for me to really hone in on how does he get affected by somebody else? Because I think Mohsen is somebody who doesn't particularly get affected ordinarily. He's a really good friend to Clark and to Emily and to everyone else. And in the office, but he's very structured and knows what his purpose is and what he's supposed to be doing. But when he is affected by somebody, it sort of jolts him, but allows him to sort of make these little adjustments and show his love in these sorts of ways. That, look, I've made a change here, and I hope she notices. So that was fun to be able to just to sort of process it from the outside in a little bit.
I love the how you handled the hair, Usman, when
Oh,
she
yes.
and she's asking your opinion, and you're like, yeah. Yeah, that's funny.
I mean, Yanic, was there something interesting in terms of figuring out, more nuanced changes with your character? Because at the same time, in playing an angel and playing someone who's there for Clark and the people around him, there needs to be something steadfast about him, and
that's right,
very familiar and reliable. And so, did you find that it was more kind of like small incremental things?
Small incrementals, but what was very enjoyable for me is that I've played, for some reason in my career, a lot of characters that have been detached emotionally, condescending, sarcastic, cold, doing all kinds of evil and power trips over other characters. And for me to have this guy who's, I hope, closer to me, which is just good-hearted, trying to do some good, trying to do the best he can with what he was handled. Perhaps Clark was not the best choice for the mission, but still working with him. And with good faith and with trust, just that alone for me was something very new and felt fresh. So that was one element. And the other element, which was a little to your point, the fact that actually you find out that he can die and that there's certain demons that can actually end his life, then makes him more human. Because I think what makes him an angel is that, oh, you can live forever. But suddenly when you find out that, no, there are actually some real dangers to him and to his life, which created a little more vulnerability, like with the car scenes and stuff, when you realize like, oh, he's actually panicked. He's in trouble, which created some nuance for this steady, fast character who brings, as you mentioned, yes. So that was fun.
It's so great to watch as well. And lastly for you, Ben, you've also kind of created this story that pulls from elements of different genres. You've got a whole element of the story that's really this great workplace comedy, although not a lot of work ever seems to get done, much to the behest of Frisbee. And at the same time, you've also got these two storylines, which are these romantic comedy threads. Were you kind of consciously thinking about the way in which you wanted to create this amalgamation of genres, or was that just a natural product of the story that you wanted to tell and the way that you wanted to tell it?
I think it was probably a natural product of just sort of starting to tell this story as best I could, and then seeing like everybody everywhere wants something and is going somewhere in their life. And that could be Wendy, it could be Mohsen. And she decides she's, newly to Burbank from New Zealand. And she finds a guy that she likes, and she thinks he's cool. And as things start to get a little dicier, she decides she's going to tell him that she thinks he's great. And that's sort of informed. Well, now I'm like, well, oh, geez. Well, where's Mohsen in his life? And what does he want? And he's good friends to everybody. And he's probably the smartest person in the office, but what does he need? What does this character want? So it's sort of each piece. And then, to Yanic's point, when Samuel discovers sort of, or knows during different points of the show, oh, I'm not infallible. There bad things can happen to me too, unless I succeed and help. I think that's just the way that my head works in terms of like, I start at the beginning, and once this thing happens, once Wendy decides that she's going to tell Mohsen that she thinks he's nice, well, that's probably going to snowball in some way or another. And so that's sort of my process.
I think if I may just add on to that, I think it's a real delight when, I think as actors, a lot of us have done things where you're just like, well, what am I doing? What about, and I know something's happening in the scene, but it is a rarity, or maybe not that usual, I should say, that everybody kind of has their own full journey and full arc. And Ben does think about that. And it's lovely because everybody has when you have everybody kind of as a 3-dimensional character, that has flaws and needs and wants, and this arc isn't the same as that arc, I think it makes it funnier. It makes it more interesting. I also think it makes it somehow, even in this heightened world, more real. I think you can connect to it because you're like, this mess that the show is, in one way, it feels much more real. Like you have all these people that shouldn't probably fit together, but they do, and you are friends with them, and one has a good day and one has a bad day. And there's something about if you get that swirl correctly, that mess becomes a bit musical to me. And I think it just feels right. And I think we had such great people and such a great writer that it to me, it really just kind of took on its own rhythm.
I did get stuck in particular, I got stuck a lot of times, and, Melissa would help me, or Steve Mallory, one of the writers, or Micah McDonald, a producer and a writer. But I got stuck with Wendy and Mosen just for a second, because I was like, well, so he can't solve this cube and she feels bad about it. And Steve Mallory, who plays Frisbee, he sent me a thing and goes, she should give him a harder cube. And I was like, well, that's life, right?
Yes.
What he's perceiving, like, I can't even do this one thing. And she's like,
you can do that.
I want to give you something impossible to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, to me, that made all the sense in the world in its own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's such a great detail in the show. I mean, I really love what you've all brought to the table and to the screen in the first season of this. So thank you so much for talking about it. Really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you very
Nice
much.
to talk to you.